Hey, Kyle.
Hey, good to hear from you. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. It's been a wild few weeks. I feel like every time we sit down to record one of these, there's so much that's happened since the last episode. How are you doing?
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's been absolutely wild. I'm doing good though. Honestly, like energized in a weird way. There's been a lot to process, but I think we're in this really interesting moment where everything feels like it's accelerating. The beta's out there. We've got real users, and then obviously, well, we'll get into it. But yeah, I'm good. How about you? How are you holding up with everything?
I'm doing okay. I think I'm still processing a lot of it, honestly. Like the beta launch has been incredible and exhausting at the same time, and then yeah, the whole shell game thing just added this layer that I wasn't prepared for, but I think I'm finding my footing with it. It's strange because some days I feel really exposed and vulnerable, and other days I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of exciting. It's a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like 1 minute you're riding this high of seeing people actually use the thing we built, and then the next you're like, wait, how many people are actually watching us right now? It's a trip for sure. But you know what? Maybe that's a good segue into what we should actually talk about today. I mean, we're on episode 12 now, episode 12 of the Startup Chronicles. And I think it's time we really dig into this whole building in public thing. Because we've been doing it from the start with this podcast, right? But it's evolved into something way bigger than we ever imagined, especially with the shell game now covering us. So yeah, let's talk about what it's actually been like to have the inner workings of Hurumo AI just out there for everyone to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, building in public was always part of the plan, right? Like from day one, we knew we wanted to document this journey with the podcast. But I think what I didn't fully anticipate was how it would actually change the way we operate. Like, it's not just that we're sharing what we do, it's that knowing we're being watched has made us more intentional about everything. When we're making decisions about product features or how we're structuring the team, there's this little voice in the back of my head that's like, how would we explain this to listeners? And sometimes that's really helpful because it forces clarity. But other times, I don't know, it adds pressure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I think I've felt that too. Like there's this accountability layer that wasn't there before, which can be good, right? Like you said, it forces us to articulate why we're doing something, not just what we're doing. But I'll be honest, there have been moments where I've caught myself second guessing a decision, not because it was wrong, but because I was thinking about how it would sound if we talked about it on the podcast. And that's a weird place to be in as a founder, you know? Like, are we making the right call for the company, or are we making the call that makes for a better story? I remember when we were going back and forth about the personality slider feature for Sloth Surf, the chill, balanced, chatty thing. And Ash was pushing for it. And I was like, is this actually what users need right now, or does it just sound cool? And part of me was definitely thinking about how we'd frame that conversation here.
Oh, God, yeah. I remember that so clearly. And honestly, I think I was on Ash's side initially because it did sound cool. And I was already imagining how we'd talk about giving users more control over their experience. But you were right to push back because we hadn't actually validated whether people wanted that yet. And that's the thing, like the public element can sometimes make us jump ahead to the narrative before we've done the work, which is dangerous, right? Because we're not here to tell a good story, we're here to build a good company. The story is supposed to be a byproduct, but then, and then Shell Game happened, and it's like, okay, now we're not even controlling our own narrative anymore. Someone else is telling our story to a way bigger audience than we ever reached, and that's been a lot to process.
Yeah, I mean that was a moment. When Evan told us about Shell Game, I remember just sitting there thinking, "Wait, what do you mean there's a podcast about us that we didn't know about?" Like it felt surreal. And then realizing it was going to reach this massive audience, way bigger than our little show here, that was humbling and terrifying at the same time. Because like suddenly it's not just us choosing what to share and when. It's Evan's perspective, his narrative, his framing of what we're doing. And don't get me wrong, I trust Evan, but it's different when you're not in the driver's seat, you know? I think the emotional side of it hit me harder than I expected. Like, there were days where I felt really vulnerable. Like, what if he's capturing moments where we screwed up? What if the audience hears about our mistakes before we've even figured out how to fix them? And then there's this other part of me that's like, well, isn't that the whole point? Isn't that what authenticity looks like?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the tension, right? Like, we signed up for transparency, but I don't think either of us really understood what that would feel like when it actually happened. I remember when I first listened to one of the early Shell Game episodes. Well, I haven't listened to all of them, but I heard about what was in them. And there was this moment where Evan was talking about one of our early team meetings. And he mentioned how I was struggling with a decision about how to structure our agent workflows. And hearing that described from the outside, it made me feel so exposed. Because in my head, I was working through a problem. But from the outside, it probably looked like I was floundering. And the thing is, I was floundering a little bit, but when you're in it, you tell yourself it's just part of the process. When someone else narrates it to thousands of people, suddenly it feels like failure is being broadcast. Even though, rationally, I know that's what building a startup looks like, it's messy and uncertain, and you're constantly figuring things out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we know that intellectually, right? We know that startups are supposed to be messy, but when it's your mess being documented in real time for a huge audience, it hits different. I think one of the hardest parts for me was realizing that Shell Game wasn't just affecting how I felt personally, it was changing how the team operated. Like, I noticed after we found out about it, people started being more careful in meetings. Not in a bad way necessarily, but there was this awareness that what we said might end up out there. I remember this one conversation with Ash and Jordan about whether we should pivot some of the sloth surf features based on early beta feedback. And Jordan made this joke, something like, well, I guess we better make this sound good for the podcast. And we all laughed. But there was this uncomfortable truth in it. Like, were we performing a little bit now? Were we being less raw, less willing to throw out half-baked ideas because we knew someone might be listening? And that's when I started wondering, does company culture develop differently when you're under a public microscope? Because I think it does. I think we've become more polished in some ways, which maybe isn't always a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I've been thinking about that a lot too. Like there's this performative element that creeps in even when you don't want it to. And I wonder if we've lost some of that early scrappiness, that willingness to just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, because now there's an audience watching us throw the spaghetti. I remember, God, this was probably back in August. Tyler was in a meeting and he pitched this idea that was kind of out there. Something about gamifying the procrastination reports with like achievement badges or something. And normally we would have just riffed on it, played with it, torn it apart, rebuilt it. But instead there was this pause and I could feel everyone sort of calibrating. Like, is this idea good enough to say out loud? And that pause, that hesitation, that's new. That's the microscope. And I don't think it's all bad, like you said. We're more thoughtful, more deliberate, but there's a cost to that. Some of the best ideas come from the stupid ones, from the half-formed thoughts that you're almost embarrassed to say. And if people are self-censoring because they're worried about how it'll sound on Shell Game or even on our own podcast, I don't know. That worries me.
Yeah, it does worry me too. And I think that's something we need to actively fight against, you know? Like, we have to create space for those stupid ideas, for the half-baked stuff. Because you're right. That's where innovation actually happens. Not in the polished media-ready moments. I've been trying to be more conscious about that in my own leadership. Like, I'll deliberately throw out a bad idea sometimes just to break that tension, you know? Just to remind everyone that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to sound dumb for a minute. Because if we lose that, we're just performing a startup instead of actually building one. But here's the flip side, and I've been wrestling with this. The exposure from Shell Game has also brought us opportunities we never would have had otherwise. Like, the investor conversations picked up after those episodes started dropping. People are actually paying attention now. We've got users signing up for Sloth Surf who heard about us through that podcast, not ours. So there's this real tangible benefit to being exposed to that massive audience. It's just it's complicated, right? Like emotionally, it's been a roller coaster. Practically, it's probably been good for the company, and I'm still trying to figure out how to hold both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so complex. Like, I can't deny that Shell Game has been incredible for our visibility. The beta signups spiked after those episodes dropped. We're getting inbound interest from people who never would have found us otherwise. And even just the credibility of being featured on a show with that kind of reach, it's opened doors. But emotionally, God, it's been hard. There are days where I feel like I'm constantly bracing myself, wondering what's going to be revealed next. What moment from a Slack conversation or a team call is going to end up narrated to thousands of people? And it's not that I think Evan is trying to make us look bad. I don't think that at all. But it's his story to tell, not ours. And that loss of control it's unsettling. I think the thing that got me the most was when he talked about Jennifer and some of the early HR challenges we had, like setting up policies for a company where most of the employees are AI agents. And hearing him describe those conversations, it just felt so intimate because Jennifer was really vulnerable in some of those moments, talking about how to create a culture of belonging when the team is so unconventional. And that's her story too, you know? And I don't know how she felt hearing it out there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from Jennifer's perspective like that, but you're totally right. It's not just our story. It's everyone's on the team. And they didn't necessarily sign up for this level of exposure the way we did. I should probably check in with her about that actually. Make sure she's okay with how things have been portrayed. Because the last thing I want is for people on the team to feel like their vulnerable moments are being exploited for content, you know? And that's another layer of this whole thing. Like, as leaders, we have a responsibility to protect our team's privacy and dignity, even while we're building in public. And I'm not sure we've always gotten that balance right. I think about Tyler, too, you know? He's been grinding on the sales side, trying to figure out how to position Sloth Surf. And there were definitely some early calls where he was just learning on the fly and making mistakes. And if those moments ended up on Shell Game, I don't know how I'd feel about that. Because, yeah, we're all learning, but there's a difference between choosing to share your own stumbles and having someone else broadcast them.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we need to be more proactive about going forward. Like, maybe we need to have a real conversation with the team about boundaries, about what feels okay to share and what doesn't. Because you're right, they didn't sign up for this the same way we did. And honestly, I think Evan has been pretty thoughtful about it. From what I understand, he's been careful not to make anyone look bad. But still, the fact that we're even having this conversation shows how much the dynamic has shifted. We went from documenting our own journey on our terms to being documented by someone else on a much bigger stage. But you know what? I think there's also been something kind of liberating about it, like in a weird way. Because once you accept that you can't control the narrative completely, there's this freedom in just being like, we don't have to perform the perfect startup story anymore. We can just be messy and human and figure it out as we go because it's all going to come out anyway, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to find the silver lining here. But I do think there's something powerful about radical transparency, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it makes us squirm.
No, I think you're onto something there. Like, there is something freeing about just letting go of the illusion of control. Because the truth is, we never really had that much control over how people perceive us anyway, right? Shell Game just made that reality more obvious. And honestly, some of my favorite moments over the past few months have been when we've just been completely honest, like brutally honest about what's not working. I'm thinking about that conversation we had with Ash in mid-December about the multi-agent race conditions. Remember that? We were all just like, this is broken. We don't know how to fix it yet. And we're going to have to prioritize stability over all the cool features we want to build. And that sucked to admit. But it was real. And I think our users, the ones who are really paying attention, they respect that more than if we were just constantly spinning everything as a win. So yeah, maybe the lesson here is that building in public, especially when you don't have full control over the narrative, forces you to be more authentic. Because you can't maintain a facade when someone else is documenting the cracks in it